Hello, everyone, and welcome to our practice group, everyone on Zoom and everyone who's here. And we're going to begin today. I'm going to say a prayer that we could all share and learn the Dharma well. Today, for the Dharma talk, I wanted to talk about the four powers of confession and purification. And one of the reasons I'm discussing this today is because I've been meaning to talk about it in our study groups that have been happening in the evening, getting ready for the Vajrasattva retreat here at Tashi Choling. But tonight's our last study group, and we're a little low on time. So I thought I would cover this topic here, and then the recording can be made available. So before we begin thinking about how in Vajrayana Buddhism do we purify our negativity, first we have to understand the big picture of why it's important to purify our negativity. And so, well, first off, before we even start that, we should cultivate the mind of bodhicitta, compassion for all beings. So take a moment to wish, may all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. I rejoice in the happiness of beings, and may it only increase. May all beings reach the state of fully awakened Buddhahood all together, with no one left out. We have to begin by understanding what we need to purify and why it's important. So we have to think about the whole context of samsara, which is that from beginningless lifetimes, all of us sentient beings have been cycling in this continuous succession of rebirths. And we all want happiness, but we don't understand how to get happiness. We don't understand the cause. We don't understand how reality works. We all want to avoid suffering, but we don't understand how that works. And so we have been doing many, many things, acting in many ways, based on ignorance, based on anger, based on desire, attachment, and so many different negative emotions. And when we act based on these negative emotions, we only create suffering for our future selves. Because the basic law of cause and effect is that if we act selfishly or based on ignorance and negative emotions, we create suffering. If we act with kindness towards others, without self-centeredness, with love or compassion, or with any of the more virtuous states of mind or wisdom, then we create virtue. And so for these countless lifetimes, we've basically been creating negativity continuously. So we have a very large storehouse or a giant tower of negativity kind of leaning over us, negative karma waiting to ripen. And somehow in this life, we've had enough merit to kind of hold that back a little bit, to have the chance to meet the Dharma, to meet with the teachings that explain how reality really works and how we can really truly find happiness. So we have a little bit of breathing space, a little bit of freedom right here. And the Dalai Lama says that when negativity has already started to ripen, then it's very difficult to purify it. So for example, when you've already found out that you have a terminal illness, or when you're already in the middle of a war, or when something terrible has already started happening, it's very difficult to change that karma. It's already ripening. So the time to deal with all of our negative karma is right now, where we have, as I said, this little space, this little moment, this little breather, where things aren't too bad. For most of us, we're in a situation where we have a little bit of space and a little bit of time to think about the Dharma. And the whole problem with that, the ironic thing, is that in that moment, you don't think of the Dharma because you can't see all of the negative karma that could potentially ripen in the future. We're not aware of this tower of negativity that's hanging over us until it's too late and it actually falls on us. So then the question becomes, well, how can we purify all this negativity? Well, the time-honored traditional way to purify non-virtue in samsara is to suffer. all sentient beings do it, you should do it too. So this is how beings generally purify negativity, is they go through all kinds of terrible sufferings. So whenever we suffer, whether we get sick or we're harmed by others or we lose our wealth or any kind of difficulty we run into, we are exhausting or purifying negative actions that we did in the past based on negative emotions. And that's just kind of how it works. And it works. You can purify things that way. It's incredibly unpleasant, and you still end up right back in samsara. And the other problem with that kind of purification is that you don't really root out the cause of the problem, because most of the time when we suffer, we respond with more negative emotions and more negative reactions. For example, if someone comes and harms us, we become very angry and we wish to harm them and their family and wipe them out for generations and destroy their house. And then we go about enacting more and more negativity. So negativity begets negativity. Suffering creates more and more suffering because of how we don't know how to react to it. We don't know how to deal with it skillfully at all. And so suffering is like generic dish soap. It cleans your dishes, but it leaves this kind of scummy film that you can't get off. So we end up with this sort of scummy film of bad habits and bad emotions that carries us forward to more and more negative actions. So there's got to be some other way to clean your karmic dishes, right? So what you should do is go out and buy a bottle of the better, new, updated Buddhist dish soap for cleaning your karmic dishes. And that involves the 4 powers. It's faster, it's easier, it's more efficient, and you won't end up with that nasty karmic scummy residue. You'll just be able to move forward with a clean slate. And so this Buddhist dish soap is the 4 powers of confession and purification. The first of the 4 powers is called the power of a support. Now, we sentient beings all alone by ourselves, it's really hard to even think about trying to purify a huge mountain of negative karma. How are we even going to do it? We're just little sentient beings. But we have friends in high places. And so we have countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas looking on us with compassion and wishing us well and wishing to benefit us and wishing to free us from suffering all the time. And all we have to do is reach out to them, to acknowledge their presence, and allow them access to our karmic storehouse of negativity, and they can begin their work of helping us purify it all. And so the power of the support is to rely on Vajrasattva or any Buddha or any Bodhisattva, that to rely on them, or a teacher, or even a statue, a representation of a Buddha. So we're relying on a form of the Buddha, an expression of the Buddha, to help us purify our negativity. And so that means supplicating to them, visualizing them, and asking them for help. The second power is the power of regretting our negative actions. So we should bring to mind as many negative things we have done in this life, negative things we have done out of anger, out of jealousy, out of attachment, desire, greed, selfishness, pride, stupidity, ignorance. We should not only bring to mind all the things that we can think of, but we should bring to mind the fact that we unconsciously are constantly creating negative karma just by having a physical composite body in samsara. We are constantly killing all kinds of bugs and bacteria and all sorts of beings that we're not even aware of. We should bring to mind the negativity not only of this life, but of all of our past lives, having spent countless lifetimes in samsara, not knowing what we were doing, trying all sorts of things to find happiness. We have inevitably done every kind of non-virtue. And not only that, but we can bring to mind the negativity of all beings, the negativity all beings are creating right now in wars and mistreating each other, the negativity that beings have created in all past lifetimes. And so this is a chance to just confess all of that with as vast a mind as we can and regret it and say, oh, this stupid non-virtue is just such a stupid, terrible thing. And personally regret what we have done and regret just the whole situation of samsara and how terrible and it is, and completely useless, futile situation. So that's the power of regret and remorse. We can especially think of things, bad habits that we have, things we want to change about ourselves, mistakes that we make over and over, or blind spots that we have, or ways that we have acted that we really wish it could have been different, looking back. Things that we slowly become aware of, because once you start confessing things, you slowly become aware of more and more things. So we can just think of all of that and really have a strong regret, strong remorse, and just wish it had not been so, wish that we had not made those choices. Now, it's important to note here for us Americans who grew up with a puritanical cultural background, that there's a difference between having strong, heartfelt remorse and having guilt. So guilt would be to become totally self-fixated based on these negativities, to say, oh, I am a bad person, I am an evil person, I'm a samaya breaker, I am useless, I am hopeless, and to go sort of on a spiral of self-fixation with that emotion. And in Buddhism, generally, self-fixation is never really a good thing. And in this case, certainly it's not a good thing, because if you're identifying so strongly with your negativity, saying, oh, that was me, that was my problem, I am bad, I am terrible, then there's no way to purify it. You're holding on to it too tightly. What we really have to do with our negativity is turn it into an object that we look at. Oh, my behavior was very bad. Oh, my ignorance was very bad. My anger was very bad. And actually, in some of the Bodhisattva teachings, for example, in Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva in chapter 6, which is the patience chapter, it's all about how to antidote anger. He gets really angry at his anger. The whole chapter, he's pissed off at his anger. So this is like the one chance you get to be pissed off in Buddhism, and it's okay, is if you're angry at your own negative emotions. So he goes after his anger and says, you are my enemy. For countless lifetimes, you have been causing me to do things that throw me into the deepest hell. You are the worst enemy I have ever had, and I hate you, and I am at war with you. I'm at war with all my negative emotions, and I won't stop until you're completely destroyed. So he gets very worked up, very passionate about this. And so this is our chance in Buddhism to have it be legitimate. You can get really angry and upset if you're angry at your own ignorance. And just don't let it swirl into the guilt and self-fixation side of things, because then that just becomes another negative spiral. And that's when you forget your Buddha nature and you forget the fact that negativity can be purified. The third power is the power of resolution, or the vow, the commitment not to repeat these negative actions. So we should generate a very strong resolve and it's like certainty in our minds. I'm never doing that again. And so just to make that as strong and as powerful as we can. If we confess everything, but we already know that we're just going to run out and do all of these non-virtues again and again and again, then the purification process doesn't really work. You don't actually really make any kind of change in your mind. The scum is still there on your karmic dishes. And then the last is the power of action as an antidote. And so that means doing something positive that will help to antidote or change this situation. And so this can be any virtuous action. It can be an act of generosity to those who need it, an act of generosity or offering to the 3 jewels or the Dharma centers. It can be an act of making images of enlightened body, speech, or mind, such as making satsas or stupas or statues or books. It can also be an act of meditation, of recitation, doing mudras, doing practice, offering sok. All of these things will purify our negativity if we do them with that intention. If we're bringing these 4 powers into our activity, then any of these virtuous activities has the power to purify our negativity. And so those are the 4 powers. And I especially wanted to talk about them in the study groups I've been doing, because whenever you read a book about Vajrasattva, it always mentions the 4 powers, since he is specifically the Buddha of purification. And it says, whenever you do any kind of Vajrasattva practice, you should always remember the 4 powers. And this is something we can think about before the retreat or before the practice. This is also Vajrasattva practice. So we can think about it on your way to the practice or before the retreat. You can start thinking about all the negativity that you want to purify and that you want to change. And as vast as you can make your mind, that makes the purification more powerful and more effective. And so with that in mind, and bringing to mind as many things to confess as we possibly can, then we'll go ahead and do the practice.